Welcome to Monster Hunters PH. My name is Kuya Ray and I'll be your guide to the wonderful world of monsters. So get comfy and listen close as we delve into the story of the Shokoi. The Shokoi are creatures in Philippine mythology which are terrifying merfolk. Compared to other Bantay Tubig or guardians of the water, which have more human features, these beings are more bestial in their shape and features. They are always male. Similar creatures also from Philippine mythology are the Sirena, Sereno, and Katao. The Shokoi are the more hideous equivalents of the merfolk and are described to be more animalistic than the Sirena. In fact, the Shokoi is even described to be a monstrous creature with long green tentacles and fish-like bodies. The upper part of a Shokoi's body is that of a fish, and from its waist down, human-like with human legs. It has blue, brown, or green skin, big eyes, sharp and long teeth, and scaly skin. They are considered to be the leader and the protector to all the sea creatures, intimidating aquatic animals such as eels, octopus, rays, and squids often swim along with the Shokoi, the guardian of the kingdom where the merfolk dwell. They attack humans or any vessel spotted in their territory. They kill people in it and take all the things they can find in the vessel. The Shokoi are ruthless, especially when it comes to humans. The Shokoi is well respected by other marine life. It is also believed that they have the power to transform into a man. They pretend and act like a real gentleman to attract women. They seduce and impregnate them to continue and to propagate their race. Usually, a Shokoi will choose the most beautiful mermaid as a mate. Shokoi is a typical hunter that chases after food while their mermaid wives, the Sirena, tend to domestic affairs. Shokois are also known for their creativity. They produce decorations to cover themselves using materials like pearls, seaweeds, stones, and seashells to decorate their homes. The Shokoi is considered to be one of the oldest sea monsters that dwell in the depths of the Philippine seas. Thus, in terms of a direct translation to English, the closest would be a sea monster. They are horrors of the ocean that are said to drown mortals and eat them. They are often considered the cause behind tragedies at sea. As one of the oldest monsters that can be found in the Philippines, they have been found to be prolific in many coastal areas here in the Philippines. When visiting the Philippines' beautiful marine and coral life, make sure that you avoid places where fishermen normally do not go. These horrid creatures tend to drown trespassers that stray from safety. Women are vulnerable to this creature not only in the water but also on land. They'll shapeshift into a very handsome and charming man to lure women for procreation. A good thing to keep in mind though is that they can only survive out of water for about an hour before they dehydrate. So when a handsome man takes you on a date from the water, find a different location for a cup of coffee. Because dehydration for these tricky creatures means death.
Warning: the story presented is purely imaginary. All names, characters, and incidents portrayed in this production are fictitious. No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, and products is intended or should be inferred.
Rolando had been a ferryman for the better part of a decade. He'd seen things in the water that made his skin crawl. A dead dolphin by the shore, the stench of rotting algae floating on the water. On occasion, he'd even see a fast-moving blur just beneath the water's surface. But he'd pay it no mind, until there was a recent drowning. The remains of a small boy had recently washed on shore. The boy's face covered in wounds that seemed to be from the suckers of a squid. Strangely though, the boy also had bruising near his ankle which looked to be from a clawed hand. Rolando simply paid no mind to the stories. The boy must have banged his ankles when he drowned. As for the tentacle wounds, mayhaps the boy was fed on by squid before he floated to the surface. Either way, business was not looking so good for Rolando. He'd been doing this job since he dropped out of high school. He'd pick people up from Kapituguan Beach, then he'd ferry them along the shore on his father's old pump boat. The guests would be ecstatic to see the sparkling waters of the Iloilo Strait, and he'd sometimes be able to ask double price from foreigners if he'd travel a little longer along the shore. Life was good for Rolando for a time, but now, sadly, not a lot of tourists have come because of the said sightings. Added with the young boys drowning, not a lot of people went to the water. Rolando, not seeing any uptick in the number of tourists, decided to buy a good strong net and wake in the early mornings to fish. But Rolando was tired of fishing along the same route that was quickly overrun by other ferrymen who copied his idea. On a dimly lit morning, Rolando went to fish in an area most people tended to avoid. The old people from their village thought of the area as sacred to the so-called Shokoy. People believed that the Shokoy made their homes beneath the waves in that said location. Rolando was never a believer of old wives' tales, so he made the trip as quickly and as quietly as he could. The waves that morning were calm as can be, and the sparkling water of the Iloilo Strait bode well for the young fisherman. Rolando threw his net in the water and, using a spare oar, paddled forward, dropping the remaining net meter after meter, watching it sink beneath the waves. When he was done, he tied the end of the net to a rope and tied the rope to a styrofoam ball, watching it float on the water surface. Rolando then turned his boat around and headed back to shore, where he would wait for an hour before coming back to retrieve the now, hopefully, full net. After a few hours had passed, Rolando got up from where he'd been napping underneath a large tree and headed for the strait. He pushed his pump boat out of the water and pulled the paracord starter and got the engine running. As Rolando got near the net, he noticed something odd. A large creature seemed to have bobbed its head above the water's surface and sunk back down as he approached. Rolando did not think of it as anything and thought it to be a floating coconut husk. He pulled up near the end of the net and began pulling it up. The net was full of an assortment of fishes, and Rolando excitedly pulled fish after fish from the net and hurriedly pulled for more. But just as Rolando was nearing the end, a huge gaping hole appeared. Rolando thought he'd snagged a shark that managed to bite its way free. But as he looked at the net, it felt slimy to his touch, as if it was ripped by an octopus or squid. On closer inspection, he realized that the net was not ripped since the broken net was frayed, but seemed more likely to have been cut with a sharp object. Scared, Rolando kept pulling at the net, intent on leaving that area as fast as he possibly could. Just as Rolando was about to pull the remaining net out of the water, he caught a glimpse of something swimming beneath the waves. He managed to get the heft of the net on the boat when he reached for the paracord motor starter. And as he started the engine, what he'd seen in the water had bashed against the side of the boat. He saw a webbed hand grab at the lip of the side of the boat. Rolando didn't hesitate as he gunned the boat toward the shore. The creature let go of the boat only to attempt at grabbing at Rolando's forearm. Rolando felt the rip of flesh as the boat went faster and the creature fell behind. The young fisherman managed to glimpse behind him for a moment to see the fish-like face and writhing tentacles of the shokoy. From that moment on, Rolando continued to fish where other fishermen were. He'd only crossed that part of the Iloilo Strait in high speeds and never attempted to fish from there again. Whenever he hears someone doubt the story of the shokoy, he shows his scars to prove them wrong. This has been Kuya Ray from Monster Hunters PH, now signing off. See you in our next video.